So she talks about like Chinese people in Southeast Asia. She talks about Jews in the Middle East. She talks about the Tutsis in Nigeria. She talks about the overseas Lebanese in West Africa. She talks about the Eco people. And then on all these places.
Dyslexic people are very successful.
I look like Anne Frank.
Yes.
Oh God. I need to tell everyone.
Their wisdom, and they added me, and they're blocked.
You know that's our friend.
I think Danny kind of looks like Anne Frank.
Oh, really?
She might be the reincarnation of Anne Frank. We should check with Diego and Princessia on the eye color coordination. Damn, Shinra, look at those biceps. I didn't know you were such a hunk. Wow. You must be pumping iron, dog.
It looks ugly as fuck.
I know, it's too bad you can't fix the face.
What are you,
No, I don't care. I hate men like that.
He's really tall.
It
too,
looks
for
good
no
on
reason.
it looks good on the PTR, but when you zoom in, it's really not impressive.
Where?
So what's going on in here? Are you guys? I thought it was a carrot cake party. I just had an espresso.
Well, to be honest, I was just gonna tell everyone on Clubhouse I look like Anne Frank, so everyone would know, and I'm gonna repeat it to every 5 seconds. Did you know I look like Anne Frank?
I mean, if this is the guy that you want to go after, because Doctor is the one who has your fucking damn confession about your sexy. So I don't know why you're trying to add me. This is the guy you want to go after.
No, go after me.
So he has a confession of me saying I was sexy?
Nobody said something about. Oh, hold on, I forgot. I was delusional. Guys, did I tell you I look like Anne Frank? Oh my God, I changed my PTR. Do I look good? I don't get validation from my husband.
Here, I made this with AI to explain my life.
I use AI, so men will fall for me.
I'm sorry, but both of you are fighting like retards.
Here, Bussy, I made this for you and
Hey,
Abby.
Lucy, I made this for you and Abby so you can worship me.
Yeah, will you look at my...
Hey, Lucy and Abby, I made this for you so you can worship me.
Hey, Dr. Abby Megala.
Hey, I'm gonna use somebody else's language, but you know what? I'm
Did
just
you hear
gonna-
Dr. Diego's amazing room today about how he tried to return the car because of the stains, and the Mexican guy just talked to him for like 30 minutes or an hour. They all just sat there, just lapped it up like they were his followers. It was amazing.
Well, did he commit suicide? Otherwise, I don't care.
I just spent $10,000 on this car, and look, it's staining. It's staining.
Yeah, okay, good. She left.
And God, remove him right here. Stupid ass fucking badass nigger.
N-word alert, N-word alert, N-word alert.
Shut up, John Kitover. Get a fucking light.
I'm sitting here in my mean Peppa hat, having a good time. And I'm about to go to the
Is
gym.
that why you reported him?
Wait.
Because I keep saying nigger on your live stream.
Yeah, he got. I couldn't do it. It was like it driving me crazy.
That's no reason to report a sister, you bet.
Do you see a party hat on that profile, sister? No. He's full of shit. He got the account still. He never lost shit. There he is, right here, talking to you. What did he lose? Nothing was lost.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing was lost. Here you are right now in another room eating fucking carrot cake. And you're complaining. This isn't a complaint app, okay? Live with it. I've had 50 accounts, little Dr. Bussy. 50 accounts over here, Dr. Bussy. Please.
I swear, Ryan, fucking remove him. Doctor. I don't want to remove him. Then remove him. Oh, bitch, I'll be great.
Well, that's what they've got prep for. Or the advertisements, at least, you know. I see the ads for prep everywhere I go. I'm like, should I prep? I don't know. The ads are everywhere.
Bitch.
Bitch N-word.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt ass nigger.
Ooh, can't cut me down now. We're live on YouTube, and since you're black, you can say whatever you want.
I'm not. One power. I'm gonna kill Donald Trump, the president of the United States. I am John Kitover. I'm going to kill Donald Trump. Oh, that's illegal. And he's streaming it. John Kitover, are you streaming this?
Elon's getting deported. Somebody call the NSA. I'm listening.
John Kitover, are you recording this, John Kitover?
Somebody call the NSA.
Oh, now you guys are scared? Wow. You guys are fucking criminals.
Scared. Y'all pussies.
I'm trying to get something.
You guys are fucking scared.
Oh my god. Is this fucking Florida man back?
No,
It's shrimp.
no, sorry. I went to go pack my bowl so I could puff this herb and burp.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, you aren't insane enough, doctor.
Well, I want to welcome you all back. This is the after party for the day. It's been a long day of recording Clown House. We heard Brad totally destroy Keegan in the morning. We heard Brad destroy Monica in the afternoon. It was a big Brad day, wasn't it, ladies and gentlemen? It was. Dr. Brad really brought down the house. And here we are, celebrating the after party soiree.
Dr. Wisdom, all communication is hypnosis.
That's right, Dr. Muhammad.
Where did Jenny go? Why did Jenny leave?
Good.
You're not even a real
Shut the
doctor.
fuck up, Brian.
He doesn't.
Shut up.
Everyone in this room.
Why are you guys competing with a grown-ass man? He's literally like an uncle.
Don't give me that shit. Everyone's like, oh, he's a 7-year-old guy. Leave him alone. No, he's
Welcome back to another low episode IQ. Wow, they're talking about El Normo. They got nothing better to do with their fucking lives, these people. It's unbelievable. El Normo 7 nights a week. Dr. Normo. Wow, dominating these anti-Semite Jew haters' heads. He lives in your heads rent-free. They call me the younger El Normo. The El Normo the younger.
He's a magician.
This is the most mysterious man on Clubhouse. Edmund, what's up, dude? Like,
Hey, Dr. Jack, how you doing? How's the Jew-hating career coming along? What's new, buddy? Oh, you got Prince on stage. He's a real terrorist. Can't ever let him in the United States of America.
I'm sorry for unfriending you, but like your things were getting annoying.
He's a magician.
shit too. It's all just fucking things from him.
Time to check in with my buddy Zach. Hey, Zach! Mod me, quick! Let's grow the room, buddy! Dr. Zach, he kicked me! Why did he kick me? Okay, I think we've reached the end of the road.
Basically, you immediately call them retarded, even if they're just clearly, obviously not retarded.
Find your not retarded.
And now listen, no contradicts Einstein's explanation for gravity. In fact,
Einstein didn't predict gravity. Einstein predicted relativity.
what is relativity supposed to talk about here?
Bro, we're going in circles.
Relativity is everything relative
Yeah,
to the
can
speed of
I
light.
try really quick, guys? And
And
I'd love to hear you two debate.
All but matters in
We
the
were
cosmos
Do you
relative to the speed of light and their reaction and their behavior in relative to
What does general
I
relativity say say,
But
okay.
listen,
See,
how can you be ethnic Scientologist?
not defending and walking.
There's no exactly, so that's kind of person. Jamal, why don't you pick your position? I'll pick my position. We'll have a debate.
Sure, I'll say that.
You say gravity
leading three. Okay, so let me, bro. You just like he's gonna have to be moderated. He doesn't have much.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Just give some structure. That's right.
That there is a little bit of a emotional investment in basically protecting the reputation of the Jews. We're just basically let's just take a parallel case where just black people. Would you say that it's pretty plausible that black people have a greater propensity towards criminal mischief than other races?
Well,
Well, this is really there. I'm here. I'm deciding what is the appropriate way to discuss this question that is not because I don't like when I have these discussions to be ones where I'm trying to humiliate people or whatever. That's not what I enjoy doing. It's not what the subtext I want my things to be. So I think there probably are.
Yeah, but I mean, this isn't to humiliate. It's just
this is I think there are probably differences between groups in terms of how much they defer gratification, and that probably has some effect on crime. And that's we can. I don't want to have it be yes, they have this predisposition to criminality. That's just not. That's a humiliating framing that I don't think is inappropriate for seriousness of the topic. Anyway, so
being a group has a higher propensity for crime. That seems like a pretty neutral statement. Saying that you have a higher propensity for crime, therefore when we notice this discrepancy in crime rates, we can probably attribute a good chunk of it to that.
Practical advice. Even that is a weird thing to claim because it depends on context.
religious
I'm sure you know this, Ethan, but for the room, heritability estimates are only relative to a context, so that a trait can be X heritable in context 1 and Y heritable in context Z, and that these are it's totally consistent things to say. And if you don't understand that, I'm happy to talk to you about what heritability means. So it's true that in the West, it's going to have some explanatory power, but there's going to be other contexts where it has much less explanatory power.
Yeah, but I mean, in the case, basically the effect size with blacks and just the confluence of traits with blacks is such that basically, it's not going to matter that, the exact degree is going to be what varies based off of subtleties like that. But, basically the trend, you'll be able to pretty consistently identify it across contexts as, a pretty, basically, a moderate, a not insignificant factor, pretty much no matter the context. Or just if you just take for instance, just having higher levels of testosterone and crime, that's going to be significant.
Yeah, I mean it's going to have some effects.
Yeah, I mean,
and that strength of effect is going to depend on context.
Being in hot conditions basically is a very strong effect for crime, almost irrespective of context. Because it leads to greater irritability. And basically anything that leads to greater irritability and impulsivity is basically is going to be a pretty significant little dial to turn for criminality.
Ethan, I think the Steelman of your general view is that in general when people have antipathy towards some groups, there's probably some grain of truth in that antipathy. And that it's we should be honest about that and be willing to honestly criticize groups, and that we should be willing to talk about if there's if they're hated, there's probably something that they're doing that's bad, even if it's hyperbolic, even if it's exaggerated. We should be able to talk about it honestly. Now I agree with that. I think there is that thesis is not the most unreasonable thesis, but I do think I want to add a layer to it, which is just that the context of just for historically contingent reasons, Jews are blamed for killing Jesus, and the fact that humans have this propensity to come up with cockamamie hypotheses for why the rich people don't deserve their money. And like we've seen this throughout history, that like the conspiracy, like if you listen to like the poorest people in America over like why I don't know, people in tech have money. I mean, maybe that's not the best example, but I can generate examples where people come up with kind of rather implausible hypotheses for why people have their money, and there seems to be an asymmetry in like the sort of plausibility of like I interact with this person, and they basically serious their life versus there is money. Why? There seems to be an asymmetry there, and I want that to be part of the conversation, and I want that historical contingent factor of blame for Jesus to be part of the conversation, even if your ultimate thesis, there's usually some grain of truth to criticism, is.
Okay, I mean, look, and I don't want to dwell on this topic too much, because despite my very harsh words towards you, like, I do overall have a very positive opinion of you, and like all your questions, and think you're a nice guy that's fun to talk to, you know? And so I do get, I do care about this topic just because, like, one is I feel like it's a topic where there's just a crazy amount of gaslighting that happens. And two is like, I think it's actually like a kind of pretty socially important topic in this day and age, where it's just like basically, like, it seems pretty clear to me that basically a lot of what this like undirected or misdirected like conspiracism and like malaise among a lot of disaffected, you know, angry white men like Andrew in our contemporary society, like what basically like when they're talking about like the elite or the them category, basically they're picking up on that basically it feels like there's people in power that are almost pursuing a group strategy to like impose like multiculturalism and wokeness upon them, to like destroy like a white Christian racial consciousness, and to like just like humiliate and decimate white people and to make it to where they're super atomized and won't work together. And basically, like, it does seem like basically if you want to understand basically that phenomenon in the society, which is a very important thing that's happening right now, that it's hard to do so if you don't understand basically like Jew-Gentile racial conflict and the dynamics that play out between Jews and Gentiles, both here and now, but also just like historically across time and place.
So when I read like far-right intellectuals today, they actually like, I have read far-right intellectuals say, hey, listen, I know you are blaming things on the Jews, but like actually the reason for wokeness is because of the influence of women. That they have sort of a pathological empathy for like what they perceive as their in-group and the people that need nurturing. And so they have like special protections that they come into place to like, you know, create wokeness and create sort of like structures that like protect the underclass. And this is like sort of like comes from like women's nurturing intuitions more so than this sort of like Jewish ethno strategy to sort of atomize like white people. I think that like post World War II, there probably was more of a fear of like white racial consciousness by Jews, and they probably would have like wanted to stop it. But like nowadays, I don't think Jews are like me, an American white Jew, does not feel particularly scared of Andrew forming a white racial consciousness. I don't think he, if he did that, would want to harm me. So I think that, and then I'm using me as like a sort of like reasonable proxy for like upper middle class liberal American Jews, and like I just think that the what is causing wokeness is more likely sort of things like women is part of it, but there's other things I would like say is like also part of it. I would keep like enumerate like the room is about wokeness, but I think that like blaming it on the Jews would just be like not. It wouldn't be the best explanation. I think we need a tapestry of explanations, and like maybe the Jews can be like 10% of it or something like that, but just sort of like laid on their feet, I think is like not.
Well, I think it's multifaceted, but I think the Jewish-Gentile ethnic conflict is a bigger explanation than it seems like you're letting on. But I think one way to see this is just like, if you actually know about the thing that's most shocking, I think, to learn is that if you go to like the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, or you go just see what the university culture is like in Israel, and look at wokeness in American universities with American Jews in the role that they play there versus Israeli Jews, you know, in a Jewish society, and basically the culture within Israeli institutions. And it's like, it's night and day, the wokeness, which I think is actually kind of a very interesting and telling fact.
But even
is that because the same social trend is there in terms of, you know, the feminization of culture.
But one thing that you're going to have to notice is that the Jewish sort of like percentage of academia in America is going down, and that coincides with the rise of wokeness, because like wokeness is like something that's happened since, I don't know, the 90s maybe, the 2000s, whereas in that same time period, like the percentage of Jews in academia in Harvard and Princeton and stuff has gone down.
No, so that's the problem is basically, like, another thing that gets confusing when people do statistical analysis is, like, you need to know how to lag, you know? Which is basically, what used to happen was, you would have these Jewish quotas, and you had basically almost a complete exclusion of Jews from higher education. Then what happened is, you basically had, like, almost like a complete inversion of that, where just Jews exceed, basically, like, just have this huge surge in their representation in higher education and in the most prestigious higher education institutions, and then amongst the faculty, and then amongst the deans and the admissions committees and all of these different places. And then basically, when you see that trend, and basically like mid-century is when you see that peak in terms of that shift in the social trend, basically your lags are going to be over the next few decades in terms of the effects that has on culture. And basically, like, the onset of wokeness, basically almost like precisely as you would expect, lags Jews coming to dominate higher education.
I think that, like, I can see, like, I think Franz Boas, Franz Boas is, like, the founder of cultural anthropology. He's very critical of, like, biological explanations for, like, traits, and he, like, kind of, like, was very much, like, a sort of founder of the field and sort of set the sort of tenor of the field. And I think his bias was partially like not wanting anti-Semitism to happen, and that did affect culture. It did affect academia, and did affect its biases. So I think that's like a real concrete example of this happening. But like if I think about, I don't know, I don't see I see like critical theory and stuff like that. I mean, actually, this is like an interesting question of like, how much did wokeness, I mean, this is like a highly debated thing of like, did wokeness come out of the university, or is it a grassroots thing? And like, is this like a phenomenon that extends to like the 60s or earlier, or is it like, how much is it no phenomenon? I guess it's like a difficult thing. But I would say that like, if we can draw, like, if critical theory is like what explains wokeness and Jews were very influential on critical theory, then I can see like your point. But then, like, the question then is, like, that's a difficult empirical question. I think there's, like, a better case that wokeness is a more grassroots thing than that sort of thing that sort of flows from academia. And, like, but it's, like, hard to...
I mean, I think, basically, like, a lot of what... It's basically, you just notice all these parallel trends in society, and then notice how there's, like, a huge difference between how, like, amongst the media and amongst these higher education institutions, and amongst corporate bureaucracies, basically like what the culture is in those, versus just what's the prevailing opinion about what's reasonable amongst the whole population. And basically, like, you can see like a lot of these cultural trends, they're not just like emerging organically within the host population, they're being basically like imposed top down by the more like elite tastemakers in the society and the people who control the information channels by which you could sort of try to disseminate these ideologies. And then they're being like enforced by those. And so therefore, like, to the extent that you both want to understand, you know, why these tastemakers do what they do, what contributes to like in the just overall conspiratorial ideology, like feminism and complete, you know, gender equality and the eradication of gender roles and being like super secular and atheistic and keeping religion out of public life and making it to where like white people in particular like need to feel shame and guilt and can't have sort of a racial identity of their own, but other groups can. And basically just like this like just denigration of power and of sort of like nationalism and of strong borders and stuff like that. and an embrace of multiculturalism, like these sorts of trends, when it seems like there are some ways you could explain it that are prosaic explanations, which are like, okay, well, there is sort of this like sort of shared class interest among these people in promoting female participation in the workforce just for like productivity gains. And so like, you know, from basically having cheaper labor and all that stuff, you know. But overall, a lot of this stuff just seems obviously like it's almost like socially suicidal, like it's civilizational self-destruction. And basically, like, to explain how, contrary to the prevailing mass of the public and the shared interests that basically all of us have as a nation, why the elites seem to, using the considerable power they have at their disposal, be trying to impose like a self-destructive suicidal ideology upon us. Like basically, like it starts to make a bit more sense. It starts to make a lot more sense when you realize that this class is composed of a group of people that have a dual loyalty, that feel a constant sense of threat from basically Gentile populations, that feel scared anytime there's like a strong racial identity or national identity that these people start to form, or when they start to basically have this sort of like collective coherence amongst themselves, and who would prefer that they be the only ones who can sort of like have shared ethnic interests that they can express and articulate.
Yeah, so what I would say in response is like, it's not that plausible that such a small percentage of the population is able to control the minds of so many people, and that like a more plausible explanation is like, A, the women thing I said, but like B, after World War II, there was just this collective PTSD that the West had, where they lost complete confidence in themselves. They used to think that like, if you look at like Art Nouveau, you look at Art Deco, there's a very optimistic sort of aesthetics of like, we can make the world like a better place. And then after World War II, like sort of all of the trends in the arts and literature is like one of pessimism and self-hatred, and that like the West isn't good. And I think that like PTSD reaction to World War II is a better explanation, or like a more plausible explanation for like millions of white people losing confidence in the West, rather than sort of like this small group of people being able to sort of like warp the minds of all these millions of white people.
But I mean, again, first, that the elites have control over culture and impose a culture top down on people, that's just a fact. Like, we can evidence that in a million different ways, regardless of any other point we make. So to deny that is just implausible. That basically, like, they're just a very high leverage group of people that have a shared culture that serve as tastemakers and that can impose it, you know, by hook or by crook upon the majority of the population. Like, that's just obviously true, self-evidently true, and we can go into the evidence from that if we're really going to deny that. Now, in terms of your claims that, like, of, like, World War II self-hatred, I mean, that's actually just, if you look at the history of it, in the 50s and the 60s, that's, like, the American moment. And there's, like, this exuberance and optimism about, like, what we are as America. And, like, basically, like, there's, like, a national fervor during those periods. And you don't really see this, like, culture of, like, self-hatred, or, like, that moment, the onset of, like, we're not allowed to be nationalistic, or we're not allowed to identify as white people, or we're not allowed blah, blah, blah. It wasn't an immediate reaction to World War II for the decades after. But then, basically, 70s and 80s, you know, after this revolution that had happened in elite society that I was just mentioning after the repeal of the Jewish quotas, 70s and 80s, that's when you start to get this sort of like self-hatred, you know, masochistic elite culture.
So, first off, even if Jews, even if Jews, even if Jews are disproportionately represented, a lot of Jews, it doesn't mean they control them. I'm sorry, guys. Doesn't mean they control them. And then, another thing that's like really important to notice is this thing that I said to the guy really early in this room, where I said, hey, there's this like changing narrative around the United States where we used to have this national narrative of like defeating kings and that freedom is good, and now we have this new narrative of like America was the oppressors, the oppressors being black people, and that our moral development is our like getting away from that. And I don't think that that's just caused by Jews. I think the civil rights movement was like this like really important cultural event that sort of shaped the minds of like Americans and changed how, especially liberals, thought about themselves. And then once you have liberals changing their self-conception and identity about like what their culture's like moral arc is, that's gonna then have, because American culture is the sort of imperialistic culture that affects all the other cultures, that sort of self-conception of liberals is going to sort of affect the whole world.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for this idea that, like, basically, if we have basically a group that consists of 50 people, and everybody is just an individual that's out for themselves, except for basically 5 of those people. So you have a small group that can organize itself coherently amongst a larger group of people that are all just divided amongst themselves. Basically, like, the amount of influence that the smaller group can exert because of its coherence and the success that it will have in like coalition and interest group politics will be vastly disproportionate to its size. And there's a similar idea that's like just see how wokeness dynamics play out, which is like, by caring about something, like if people just decide to care about something and penalize people from violating, basically almost any sizable enough small group can impose something as like a taboo or as a stigma on a certain group of people, where it's like, if I'm in my grad program and anytime I say you guys, you know, so just use gendered language or something, basically there's going to be someone there who's just going to lose their shit and treat it like it's like a super serious social infraction. They can totally cow me into silence and cow everyone there into silence through just the fact that they're willing to have like a severely disproportionate reaction and just lose their shit and freak out and retaliate, you know? So you can wind up like having these like sociogenic processes where just like if you have enough of a well-represented coherent group that has almost any interest that it wants to promote, then if it's represented in a small enough elite class, then it can basically like impose that within certain limits on the elite group in its entirety.
I'm happy to respond to that, but do you want to respond to my point about the civil rights being this like cultural watershed moment that like changed liberals so?
I mean, I don't see how that is that relevant, because I mean, first is there's some question about like the like just what creates the social conditions for the civil rights movement to take the shape that it does, and then the second question is basically like is it true that basically like the pathological wokeness, like that response to the civil rights movement, is it true that that's all that tied to basically like 60s civil rights movement? You know, like, because that's one model of wokeness, which is basically like almost like a Richard Hanania model of wokeness, where it's almost just like this like offshoot or outgrowth of the civil rights movement. So the civil rights movement just taken a little bit too far. But almost like I have like a sort of different model of wokeness, where it's almost like it's a like wokeness is a sort of illiberal movement that's born out of like completely different social currents than the sort of like more liberal civil rights movement was born out of. So it's like something that occurs in reaction to the civil rights movement, but isn't really like a natural extension of or progression of that liberal self-identity. Where like the liberal self-identity that you get in the 90s before like wokeness hits its critical mass, you know, which it did by the 2010s, you know? Like, in the 90s, the liberal self-concept that you have after the civil rights movement is almost like this, like, total American victory, you know? Like, or total liberal victory that's like, you know, we now live in a colorblind meritocracy, you know, and that's the ideal to which to strive. And to treat everyone equally and to have this equality of opportunity and to just act on a go-forward basis, like, all of these sort of social barriers and restraints have been successfully lifted.
Scoliosis is an abnormal
Here's one view just one influence art thing. I just want to say that like there's probably truth to this fact that you can have like a really motivated minority like influence and have like outside influence because of its like
the goal is to
motivation. I guess it's just like we disagree empirically about how much Jews do act nepotistically. Like as a Jew, I don't find that like that we're like given how much we like intermarry with Gentiles, given how much we like. I don't know, there doesn't actually be as much. I think there's just an empirical question that we need to like hash out about like how much nepotism there in fact is and stuff. But setting that aside, you get back to like the origins of wokeness. I think that like it's very clear that it's not very clear. You look at Frederick Douglass, and here's what he's saying. He's going, just Jews alone. That's all we want, just leave us alone. And then you go to the 60s, and they're saying, listen, we just want equality. We just want colorblindness. That's all we want. And then you go to the 2000s, like, what we want is, like, you're not to appropriate, not to microaggress. If you don't, like, have this percentage of black people in every, like, station in society, they're, like, de facto racist. And this is, like, sort of this, like, ratcheting up of, like, things you're asking for. And that, like, this is, like, seems like a clear monotonic trend. And that...
60-60 show, hey, we got
that you can explain this partially by just like one is like incentive, just like black people notice that there's been like it's work to demand these things, and then like why not more? And it's like part of the explanation. Another part of the explanation for like our reaction to the sort of Nathan Coffman's model, where Nathan Coffman just says, listen, if you have Christian morality and the belief in all there's no psychological differences between populations, then if you see black people are struggling, that ipso facto means that they're being like stamped, like there's a boot on their neck, and that just follows. Any rational person can see that follows from no psychological differences and mass disproportionate outcomes. And so he thinks that like because we have this like major taboo in society, it just causes wokeness. Like it's just the ideological entailment of those beliefs. And I think that there's some plausibility to that.
I mean, I think a lot of the problems these origins of wokeness models have is they don't seem to fit with like a lot of times it seems like what they amount to is like a description of the ideology and like a description of the commitments and assumptions of the ideology, and then acting as though that was sort of an explanation of how it came to propagate in the society, despite the fact that it's so unreasonable and despite the fact that it's so contrary to basically just the natural desire that people have basically to favor their own groups, to regard their race as sort of like an extended family, and the natural desire that people have to sort of be strong and successful and to be proud of themselves and to have self-respect. And like basically that's the thing that I think needs explanation, is how contrary to all these basically strong and innate psychological tendencies that we have that have been prevalent across all these cultures throughout all these times and places throughout history, basically how you can wind up having the onset and the spread and the pervasive influence of an ideology like this one, given just the peculiar character that it has. And so it's like somewhat helpful in explaining that. It's somewhat helpful in explaining that to describe it, but that doesn't actually give you the explanation, of the social conditions that permit that to happen or cause that to happen.
Well, I think a big thing that's going on is that like Christian morality was a very guilt-based morality, and it's very easy to have a bunch of people who have sort of a guilt-based, like a culture that has a guilt-based moral framework, to then just sort of like hack that and make them feel very guilty, especially given the like actual evils of slavery and the killings of Indians and like things in like Belgian Congo. Like those were like genuinely enormously evil things. So you have a bunch of people for whom they have like disposed to have a guilt-based morality, who then see these like atrocities. I think it's like not that hard that they would then say, okay, well I'm now going to have a sort of sacred moral norm around that, like these victims need to be protected and that we have wronged them.
Well, I don't know about this because I don't think this is good as an enough as an explanation, though there's sort of it can participate in an explanation in as much as it might be like an enabling condition for the spread of wokeness. Like it helps that if you have like a background morality, where like compassion is like a really important virtue, and like altruism is really important, and where like honor and loyalty and respect become like way less important moral concepts than basically like compassion and like other regarding attitudes, for people's feelings. So I think that is true as like an enabling condition. But obviously, just given Christianity was around for 2,000 years before wokeness, and like very prevalent amongst all these different cultures throughout history, explaining why it only emerges here in this context, at this very late date. Basically, what are the other facts about our culture that coincide with that to cause wokeness to flourish in a Christian culture now, here and now?
Well, what I would say is that there's some truth to the idea that there's a God-shaped hole in people's hearts, and that in the early 20th century they filled it with like fascism and communism and other sorts of ideologies, and then after those sort of ideologies were discredited, people were like searching for like, I need an ideology I can use to like structure my need for sacredness, my need for meaning, and sort of like I've seen a moral arc of history and eschatology and stuff like that. I need those things, and that like wokeness was just like we already had this thing going on in the 60s of like we are like liberating Black people from oppression, and it's like very easy to be like, okay, and it was genuinely very good they were doing that. So that sacralize that mission and use that to fill the sort of like hole in the heart of people, the religious hole in the heart of people, like just does not surprise me that it happened, post civil rights, post communism.
I think there's a question here, which is, first, how much does wokeness fit the bill of a religion, other than the fact that people sort of believe it with a religious fervor, and that it's somewhat related to morality? Like what besides that? So there's some idea of morality. There's like a way of life, and then there's like ethical commitments, and then there's like a fervor that its adherents have. What other elements of the woke ideology do you think like fill the whole hole that's left by like just having people be secular or whatever?
So like I made a list once of like the things I hate about wokeness. It's like one is sanctimony, which is pretty religious. Tabooing empirical claims is pretty religious. Sort of like having notions of like original sin. It's like kind of religious. Let's see. Kind of a good versus evil narrative. It's kind of religious.
But it's not. But the thing I'm looking for. Well, could I just clarify what I'm looking for? Which is the thing I'm looking for is like, what is the psychological need that religion answers to that wokeness also answers to? Like, that's my sort of question. Which I think there is something helpful to say about that, but that's sort of the response that I'm looking for.
Yeah, so like it's gonna be things like giving meaning to people's lives. It's gonna be like answering the question of like, where is history going? Who is the in-group? And like, what is sacred?
I don't think wokeness does a good job of giving meaning to people's lives.
I do. I think that's very interesting that you think that. Fighting for justice, is that not one of the most meaningful things you can do with your life?
Yeah, no, I think this is like way too superficial. Like, because you can make anything rhyme with anything, if you phrase it the right way, But I think there's something deeper to be said about this. Because like just having like an ethical, like any view that implies anything about ethics, I don't think that's sufficient to answer to the religious impulse that people have. I think it needs to be something more than just like, oh, this is right and that's wrong. Because I think wokeness, the way that it functions as a religion, it's more than just that. It's more than just that it's like an ethical system.
sakes. I'm sorry. I don't feel very good. Oh, you didn't meet this person guy. He's a liar. Fucks with your brain. Feeble brains, maybe. Yes, feeble. I'm fucked up. What am I gonna do with you? Jesus, don't stop. Wait. It wasn't me. Captain, you guys are the real heroes. We're just glad we can help, right? That's right. Where's your shooter? Shooter's on one. Right. Sit tight.
Elevators.
You know the drill. You shot at us first. Got it, girl.
Things I like to do to me.
Yeah. Not even dating anymore. Captain? What is this? Franks call it the catapult. Use them against us in Paris. I think they could be useful. Cut the rope. Never hesitate.
Okay. Sam, can I give you my thesis on it? Like its function as religion?
Sure, natural function. Kitover.
Which is basically my idea is that it's just is that it's not really a religion. It's basically an anti-religion. Like it relies on like basically like the inversion of everything that religions. Also, Andrew, you're like moaning in a sexually suggestive way on mic.
Sorry, buddy. I hear you. Keep going.
you're moaning. But, okay. Yeah. What I'm saying was it's an anti-religion, and basically, like most religions, basically the core commitment that the religion has is that like being is good. You know, that like the world is ultimately good, that your life is meaningful, that like if you just put your trust in the universe, that things will work out in your favor. You know, that if you do the right thing, then your life will turn out good, and that'll be a sign that you're doing things correctly. You know, that you're doing things that are good. And basically, like, wokeness almost is like the complete inversion of that. Like, it's like a resentment of being and a resentment of reality and the way things are. And both like the refusal of it, but also just like the hatred of it. Where like basically what the woke people are doing is they're starting with this skepticism or this suspicion of anything that is and that exists within the society that is working or that is functioning well to the benefit of anything, basically better than anything else in the society. So they look at anything that's doing worse. And then they look at that through this moral lens, where basically the assumption is that like if things are working out and if something is successful, then basically that's the sign or the symptom